Shotcalling, callouts, mid-encounter leadership. The act of communicating instructions and reminders throughout the course of an encounter with the intent of leading the group to victory more efficiently than without them. Shotcallers exist throughout most forms of team-based games and activities, as having one person shouldering the bulk of team coordination during high-intensity situations permits the remaining participants to concentrate more on moment-to-moment execution and less on remembering strategic plans. In some circumstances, where gameplay permits and stakes are deemed high enough, shotcallers have gone so far as to remove themselves entirely from being an active participant in the direct games they are shotcalling. They opt instead to watch an active participant's POV and make calls without any mechanical demands on themselves. The importance of this aspect of encounter progression and its impact on the team play and morale is often overlooked and underserved. This series exists to address those shortcomings with shotcalling in the MMO space. Shotcalling as a means of improving the chances of success in an MMO PvE encounter, typically a raid boss of some variety, is what we'll be focused on for the time being. Experience raiding as a shotcaller and as a regular raider in both World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy for the past 6 years at various levels has motivated me to create something of a framework for what a competent shotcaller in a game like these would look like. Though other creators have made helpful videos and written posts about big picture Raidleading and its many responsibilities, I want to hone in on one specific aspect of Raidleading that may be underserved. If my experience is the norm amongst shotcallers in these spaces, we have all become shotcallers out of necessity. It's not what defines whether we play or not. We pick up the mantle and pass it around as required. We see the need in the group that either has to be filled entirely or needed to be taken over due to there being slack in the system, which led to more polls before clears. We improve slowly, if at all, and we don't often take time to self-reflect or try to improve in the aspect of our rating or of our leadership. Fellow raiders will usually not provide ample feedback on how to improve, and we often fail to ask. We may too gladly decide to pass the torch should someone else volunteer their services in the aspect of shotcalling. We have not, as of this point, had an adequate framework to assess ourselves, tenets to work with, guidelines to try to follow, to better serve ourselves and our teams better as leaders and as individuals. For every raid leader that lost their temper mid-raid, for every group that needed a leader when no natural-born ones stepped up, for every shy and quiet person that may one day grow into a confident leader, due in some part to how they carry themselves in their sometimes overly serious endeavors in virtual worlds, I want to make something you can use to better yourselves in this position, should you find yourself in the hot seat, shotcalling. Raidleading is typically an umbrella term used to describe a litany of activities done by people who are in charge of a raid roster. You can roughly divide these duties up amongst several categories and typically several people as well. There are raid-leading responsibilities on the player level and on the encounter level. Raid-leading occurs before, during, and after raid encounters. Many of these responsibilities are more managerial in nature, sometimes aggravating to accomplish, and almost always uninteresting. Player recruitment, cooldown planning, log review, loot distribution, scheduling, and more are all raid leader activities that occur before and after encounters. Shotcalling is the raid leading that occurs during the encounter itself. It is the fastest paced form of raid leading and often the most rewarding to accomplish. I've had experience in most forms of raid leadership, but I've retired from all but shotcalling due to understanding my own limitations within those other responsibilities over my time. I also find that existing resources regarding raid leadership often focus on these more managerial, holistic aspects of raid leading, while the mid-fight action is left as a minor footnote. Much like every other aspect of raid leadership, the purpose of shotcalling is, above all else, to reduce the amount of attempts needed to finish an encounter. There are plenty of pitfalls to shotcalling that can result in the opposite becoming reality. Player confusion and resentment result from poor shotcalling. Improper or inconsistent calls will cause more wipes than they prevent. Remember that there are many groups that use absolutely zero voice communications to clear endgame content in various games. Japanese data center players on Final Fantasy XIV, for example, have the highest clear rate of endgame content of any region, and they use voice comms the least. Comms and shotcalling by extension are not necessary for the completion of encounters in games like these. Tools like deadly boss mods and weak auras in World of Warcraft outright make several aspects of shotcalling obsolete and redundant. However, there is a reason why world progression teams in these games still rely on a whole team of shotcallers on top of all resources at their disposal, and it is because good shotcalling reduces pull count. As advanced as add-ons for World of Warcraft become, and as good as the players that play these games become, there will still be benefits to having actual people assisting and communicating play-by-play demands of these fights, reminding specific people in specific ways, and learning what strategies of speech and wording help their team efficiently. Though what separates good and bad shotcalling could be divided a myriad of different ways, I have opted to split the major principles of the role into 6 sections, of which I will be going into more detail on at later times, most likely making a video on each, discussing why they are important to shotcalling, what a good shotcaller does in regards to them, and what bad shotcallers failing to apply them might look like. The tenets are as follows. Temper. How behavior, tone of one's voice, candor, and the view of the raid team affects the ability to shotcall and maintain a positive raiding environment. Consistency. How being able to repeatedly phrase the same calls over the course of an entire encounter helps maintain a rhythm to each pull that assists raiders with gaining encounter muscle memory. Delegation. The ability to detect one's own blind spots and handle them by requesting other raiders to shoulder some aspects of the shotcalling burden. Team adaptation. How to identify the strengths and weaknesses of the roster the shotcaller has, instead of the one they envision as their ideal dream team. Crisis management. How to handle encounter pulls that do not go according to plan, and how to attempt to salvage them before they become unsavable. And finally, feedback. How to self-analyze, request for feedback, and analyze feedback from others about your own performance. I will be working to make at least one video per tenet going forward, delving into what makes each one important to shotcalling, and how one can identify their own faults and improve upon them. I hope you can join me for the next installment. Thank you very much for watching.